But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
Make America healthy again. It's the slogan that brought together former adversaries Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and President Donald Trump under a unified vision of a happier, healthier tomorrow. But questions remain. Where does MAHA fit into the second Trump administration? And especially among the competitive agendas of Kennedy's newfound allies? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to welcome you to today's micro journey, taking place in the form, once again, of a roundtable discussion. My name is Liam Sturgess, and I will be your host for today. I'm a musician, writer, researcher, MAHA fan, based in Vancouver, Canada. And I absolutely love learning more about how our world works, one micro journey at a time. Now, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined today for this discussion by two distinguished guests, both of whom, as I understand, have a particularly interesting perspective on MAHA and its major players. Please join me in welcoming Michael Kane, founder of Teachers for Choice, and Gabriel, founder of Libre Solutions Network. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here. Yes, thank you very much.
Now, I would love if we could start by having you guys just a sentence or two about who you are and what you do. Now, of course, the audience will probably be familiar with you both, but on the off chance that there are some new folks joining us today.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm Michael Kane. I was a New York City public school teacher. I was fired for not getting the COVID shot back in 2021. And the only truly prominent person that backed me was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Children's Health Defense. We're still suing in state and federal court over 3 years later. I founded Teachers for Choice. We're opposed to mandates. I worked for Children's Health Defense for a while and then worked for American Values 2024, a super PAC designed to make Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the next president, but now is a big supporter of MAHA. And most importantly, today I am here speaking on behalf of myself and no one else.
Same here. I only speak for myself. My personal pet passion project, the Libre Solutions Network, is my platform really where I'm trying to show people the exciting opportunities in decentralizing technology across the board and what we can do to pragmatically build a better digital future. As far as MAHA is concerned, my angle to all this is that I was working for Canadian Blood Services before I was terminated due to a mandate. And I have been paying attention to many of the discussions during COVID because, well, it's quite personal, but the other side of it is that it is a big part of the broader political picture. And so I'm very excited to explore that today.
Rock on, guys. Well, and I have the distinct pleasure of knowing both of you from different parts of this this larger campaign of health awareness and pushing back against government when it overreaches in that respect. And I've had conversations with you both about this topic in particular, and I'm looking forward to fleshing out what you guys think. It sounds as though, as we're going through this very interesting process of the new president-elect Trump announcing his picks to fill various, cabinet positions, to lead various agencies, first being ecstatic about Kennedy being chosen as Secretary of Health and Human Services. What a fantastic turn of events for those who support him. But alongside that, of course, you've got sort of this roller coaster of other people being put into positions of power, or at least, nominated. And it really is ups and downs in my experience. And I think you guys may agree. And that's why I find it really fascinating now, zooming out and going, okay, so you've got Kennedy in this position to do great things with health, but he's got to work within an administration that's also clearly got a position on the military, that's gearing up for its agenda, whatever it is, on warfare or the prevention of it. And so I'm wondering if we want to start by taking a look quickly at this article, Michael, that you published not too long ago, the end of October, Gates v. Musk, Competing Worldviews. Now, Elon Musk has been announced alongside Vivek Ramaswamy as co-directing a new Department of Government Efficiency. But beyond that, what is Elon Musk's role, and why is he, and for that matter, why is Bill Gates relevant to MAHA or the discussion we want to try to have here?
So I wrote this piece and published it 5-6 days before the election, and posed it as, whoever wins this election, we can really look at it as, if Trump wins, there is a Musk worldview we're heading towards, and if Kamala Harris wins, there's a Gates worldview that we're heading towards. And so I'll go over that in a second, but clearly now it's a Musk worldview. It kind of, some people say, in a landslide, but the government is controlled by the Republicans. It is moving in that direction. And Elon's rhetoric around Mars and around going to Mars is increasing every day. You're seeing more and more of it. He's recently debated by proxy Neil deGrasse Tyson about this, where they're saying it's foolish what he's saying to do. And what's fascinating about the clip you started with, Liam, about "we choose to go to the moon," Jack Kennedy, is Elon Musk is invoking some of that same ideology and how he's responding about going to Mars, saying this isn't about venture capitalism. We need big ideas. We need to motivate and move this population, to move people in order to have achievements. It's not just about investment and about money. I've spoke to Holden about this from American Values. He's pretty prominent on X right now, putting out a lot of stuff around MAHA and such. And he's a huge proponent of space exploration, of going to Mars. And he had said to me how great he thought it would be if we were able to have a global vision behind this big enterprise, say like a going to Mars. And what he said to me was, he would love if Elon Musk was that figure, but he's such a divisive figure. He doesn't know if that's the person that could really mobilize this global vision. So what I'm going to propose here today is that, and I could be wrong, and this is a world in motion and could change at any minute. But I'm going to propose that MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, has already been green light by a powerful faction in the military. And the main reason for that is a mobilization that I believe revolves around Elon Musk's desire to go to Mars. You can't, if you go to Mars, Elon has said he wants to make space fleet real. That means he wants thousands of astronauts. To have astronauts, you must pick from the cream of the crop. You must have a healthy population, mostly of men, not only men, but mostly of young men, that you can pick from and that you can then do this thing. So I think MAHA has been greenlit as a military expedition. I think Bobby Kennedy's goals are going to happen in the next 4 years. And I'm also going to predict that I think those goals are going to shock the nation so much. It's going to be one of the biggest health events of centuries that is provable of what Bobby Kennedy was able to do. That Bobby Kennedy is going to be viewed as a legend and a hero. And I could see him becoming president in four years and then leading that Mars vision, because I believe Bobby Kennedy is not going to be the divisive figure that Trump and Musk are. That I do think they would have a problem mobilizing the entire population. I think the statesmanship of Kennedy, just how amazing he is with the heal the divide rhetoric, which I believe he's completely true to. I think when anybody hears and really listens to Bobby speak, you are struck by the fact of how little divisiveness and vitriol is there. There's almost none, you know? So anyway, that's my vision. I know I've said a lot. I know I made some big predictions there, and I know I could be totally wrong. And anything can change. I mean, major things could happen. A major climate event could happen. A world war could break out. There's a lot of things. But if a world war broke out, wouldn't you really need that same healthy militarized force? So there can obviously be multiple agendas here. But anyway, that's kind of my big thesis that I'm starting with.
Well, and your last thought there, Michael, I think helps us bridge right into at least what my reaction to Gabriel's perspective on this was when he first brought it to me. But I don't want to put words in his mouth. Gabe, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really liked what you said there because, Michael, because I have the same base assumption you do here, where there is clearly a military-aligned faction that gains something from what MAHA is. Now, to be honest, I'm in favor of what MAHA wants. I think many people have been afflicted by what Catherine Austin Fitts calls the Great Poisoning, and that has created many problems beyond just military readiness, but also things like economic factors, people's overall mental health and well-being, as well as physical health and well-being. So these are serious problems we do want to see addressed. None of anything I'm going to say here is knocking that, but health, just like we saw during the COVID crisis, is kind of a double-edged sword when wielded from the top down. I don't necessarily think that all the players in this coalition have the same benevolent motivations, and there is a huge difference between trying to turn around the health of a population quickly on a dime versus planning it as a forward-thinking, multi-generational project. And I think with many of the advanced technologies being introduced into the space right now, I am concerned of these darker aspects of, changing population-wide health on as quickly as you can. But then also I am more convinced it has more to do with ongoing and escalating and potential future military conflicts than necessarily going to Mars or other space missions across the board, if for no other reason than the fact that that's a long-term project. I think even if we did everything we could, that's still outside of Trump's term. And so what is Trump able to accomplish in these 4 years? I have no idea, especially with Kennedy's help. There's a lot that can be done. But in my opinion, I am convinced whatever the glue that is that holds this faction together, it must be some form of the war machine that has been embedded in the American government for at least as long as I've been alive, if not longer.
Now, okay, so when Gabe and I first talked about this, my first reaction was, if we live in a world where every country has some form of military force and everyone could, in theory, provoke an armed conflict, wouldn't you want your country, be it the United States or Canada or whatever, wouldn't you want them to have as robust a military as possible if we agree that it exists, or it at least needs to exist in the short term because every other country has a military? Is it not something you would want that force, whether they're actively enlisted or whether they're the people you'd like to recruit, wouldn't you want them to be at as healthy a place as possible? Like, is there inherently anything bad about that, or what am I or was I missing from that initial premise?
So this is where I'm going to reach far beyond my areas of expertise. I really do focus mostly on technology, but I do take other people seriously with different strong opinions and perspectives. And part of that is the dollar. Many people are concerned about threats to the US dollar and its status as the world reserve currency and how that can evolve. And so I believe the model where, I'm going to put it bluntly here, I believe the Western countries have been profiting off making people sick, which is what Fitts calls the Great Poisoning, and that they had to radically readjust when they realized, oh shoot, if the dollar doesn't keep us afloat much longer, we're going to have to course correct. And I do think the plan is to fight to defend the dollar. I think anyone saying, oh, they're just going to gracefully decline and there's nothing they can do, I think they're perfectly willing to go down fighting, regardless of how overall successful it'll be in the long run. And so I think there are many factors, but it's also not just purely economic. I do think there has more to do with some of the bigger geopolitical fights going on that have more to do than just the US dollar. We do see conflicts all over the world escalating now. I mean, even this week, Biden was saying, like, oh, let's give Ukraine nukes, and if we're going to be in a more trigger-happy world, it's of course they're going to have to course correct. And so even if military readiness itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, again, what corners are we going to cut? What ethical boundaries are we going to allow to be crossed in the name of achieving this so important objective? Those are the things that I am very concerned about in terms of this problem.
In terms of military readiness, one of the most immediate factors I see is that clearly Trump is going to stop illegal immigration at the border to the best of his ability, which I believe is going to be more than Biden had done. I think that's generally understood as highly likely to happen. 70% of American young males can't be recruited to the military because they're obese or they're unhealthy. So that's something that Bobby has said, Trump has said on Rogan. It's something that's out there and is well known and referenced. The part of the undocumented immigrant surge is to have a base of recruitment, because the huge amount of the recruitment to the American military has been coming from there. So just as an immediate concern, if you're going to cut that off, you're going to mess with military readiness in terms of people that you're getting into the military. And that's another reason why for immediate military readiness, you want to have a healthy population amongst the people themselves, amongst American citizens, for the immediate cause of being military ready, beyond even what I'm talking about, which is a decade or two out also.
Yeah, the recruitment for the military from people coming in, that would mostly be from people who presumably unregistered, or undocumented immigrants wouldn't qualify for military.
No, there's a pathway. Absolutely, there is. There's a pathway for undocumented immigrants in America to join the military, do their service, and then get on a path to a green card. Absolutely, that does exist for sure.
Interesting. Preferential treatment via the military route. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. So, and now I want to clarify, I myself, I'm a pacifist. I've sort of adopted that. To me, a world where everyone is armed to the teeth and always ready for conflict is not a healthy world. That's not kind of our optimal state. So I'm coming from the place of, until the last shot has been fired, and I don't mean like, let's fire more shots till we get there. I mean, let's fire the last shot and never fire another, then we're not quite where we need to be. So now it's curious thinking of going back to space and thinking of it as a military enterprise. And it's also interesting thinking back to, again, the clip we started with, JFK, his assassination, the anniversary was just a few days ago. Yeah. He didn't live to see space, 1969, man on the moon. But what I found curious revisiting that speech was he wasn't just talking about space. He lists a bunch of other examples, one of them being, I think, football. Like, why do we do all of these things, not just go to space, all of these things being examples of challenges that America, in his view, was perfectly qualified to take on and accomplish. And the reason was because they're hard. That's why we do them. And I wonder looking back, as I understand, the prioritization of space in the 60s was to outcompete the Soviet Union, who was also in the process of, massively accelerating their space program. But it's not just about space, right? Space being a vehicle for military development, space being, to a certain degree, a place where if you dominate, you also dominate militarily. We're quite vulnerable when you consider how broad the sky is and how small we are. So can we kind of bridge the gap between when we talk about the space enterprise today and what we're looking ahead to, what Elon Musk might be trying to take on, bridging that to the military itself? What is the relationship there as we understand it?
I'd actually like to say a couple things. One, Trump is the president that created the Space Force. That was created and that was made by him. And right as we're having these conversations and talking about this, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, headed by Senator Gillibrand from New York, is having UAP hearings. This is a number of public ones at this point. And there's a lot of discussion around that. I mean, I don't think this roundtable is the correct one for us to go overly into that. That's not really where any of our expertise are. I would say one thing is that I've heard a lot of people I know and I find very credible that say a lot of these UAPs are actually secret military crafts that are being witnessed and that are being seen and that are being caught, which goes into the black budget space, which Catherine Austin fits also talks about missing billions, missing trillions from the US budget. She talks about DUMBs, deep underground military bases that are built out for surviving holocausts, for surviving, military holocausts, nuclear holocausts, these types of things. So I think we're seeing there's a lot of ground here that is very uncertain, and it's not clear precisely what it is or what's going to come of it and what's going to happen. But it does feel like we had President Trump visited a SpaceX launch, first president ever to do so. I just feel like there's a lot that's happening that is drawing my attention to space and to the idea that I feel like for many years, Musk talking about Mars was kind of like, all right, whatever, okay, billionaire boy, like, go ahead, talk about Mars. And I just get the sense it feels different to me now. It feels like there's a seriousness and a focus, and some of these odd things like these UAP hearings, which Michael Schellenberger showed up to out of nowhere, which blew my mind. I was like, what is Mike Schellenberger doing testifying at a UAP hearing? So actually, I haven't really said much. There's a lot moving under the carpet here that just has caught my attention in a way that I haven't paid as close attention to this as I have before. And I'm trying to connect these dots.
Michael Schellenberger being one of the authors of the Twitter files, yes?
Yeah, right. So, being a major free speech, alternative, independent media person, I'm just like going through my feed and I see, UAP hearings. I follow it a little bit. Oh, Schellenberger. I was like, what is he doing here? And what is he talking about? So our worlds are kind of crossing over in a way that I wasn't anticipating, wasn't on my scorecard, for 2024, 2025, but here we are,
And before you jump in, Gabe, I just want to give that's fascinating to me that Michael Schellenberger would show up there, and maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation, but it to me is a demonstration of something I've noticed, a phenomenon that there was another example of a very prominent medical freedom doctor figure who I won't name by name, who has become like a go-to on his particular field. And there was not that long ago, a very, we've had some strange storms, like weather that is sort of unusual and destructive, and very, each part of the world has their example of that. And this particular doctor on their publication came out and was all of a sudden an expert on HAARP, the high aerial something, the research facility in Alaska, which, as I understand it, has the ability to manipulate weather. But this particular individual, it felt very interesting that they all of a sudden had some sort of expertise on this topic. And you see sort of these figures sometimes kind of jump over into a different field, and people listen to them. And that's the part that I find interesting. So that seems like another example with Schellenberger. But Gabe, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No worries. One of the things I want to jump in terms of bridging the Mars story and the space and the military side of all this is that what I like about you playing that clip from the start with Kennedy is that space is an amazing story, even if nothing great happened. For instance, it's funny because I started really ramping up my health journey after I saw a movie, Fly Me to the Moon. You might have heard of it. It's the one about faking the moon landing. But anyways, I started to really accelerate my progress because I was exercising more. Not because of the movie, but it just worked out that way. But the thing is that the story of humanity coming together to do a project, a really big project that's never been done ever, to our knowledge, is a huge thing. It's motivating, it's captivating. And so I think when you want to talk about it from either a heal to the divide angle, where you want to bring people together, you want to give them a common stake in society, in the things that's going on, that's a very powerful and compelling story. But there's a danger in compelling stories because compelling stories can also be used for propaganda and for pushing people in directions you don't necessarily want to go in. And it's very tough because I think there are many amazing aspirational, great, it motivates the incentives in a way that maybe some of the leaders in countries will no longer see their own citizens as enemies and more people they can work with, and human capital they're trying to maximize. That's probably what Musk is thinking about in terms of these things. But the downside to all this is that maximization isn't always benevolent.
Oh yeah, and I want to jump right on that. You talk about utilizing human capital. One of Musk's big thing is the cyborging of the population. To coin a term, cyborging. I think everyone, it's not real, but we know what I'm talking about. Whitney Webb has pointed out that in your early cyborg trials, what was it, Neuralink, right? When that was done in the beginning, that the majority of the primates that were tested on died. And she had said that this felt to her like a continuation of eugenics, that this isn't about this techno future beautiful place where we all have Neuralink and can say hi telepathically, or like whatever, or that like people who have been made handicapped will now have their limbs back. No, she actually viewed it as a new form of eugenics. I don't know if I agree with her, or maybe I do, but in a different way. I believe part of the MAHA thing, which Elon Musk is totally on board on. Elon Musk is now defending Kennedy, even defending Kennedy, saying the MMR vaccine is not efficacious, which is big for Musk. Musk didn't go there before. He's defending MAHA in a major way. I'm starting to wonder if, just like needing millions of people to get the right cadets for a space fleet, do you need millions of people to do these cyborg experiments on? As you're starting to implant things, as you're starting to do things to individuals, do you require healthy people? So, 50, 60, 70, 80% don't die, so that they continue to live, so that you can figure out, how can I make this cyborging of the population profitable, successful, and to whatever is the next envisionment of what Musk sees. I like Musk in a lot of ways. I like the free speech stuff, which isn't perfect, but it's better than most. But he still comes from this Silicon Valley. There's some weird stuff over there. The singularity, there's like this weird techno religion that comes out of there that I ultimately don't completely trust from Musk. I always got to keep my eye. I think we all do. I mean, just to be aware. So I think that's another reason for this MAHA agenda. And I also want to be clear about one thing. I support MAHA 1000%. Like, in my soul, in my heart, in my being, I am so happy that Bobby Kennedy is where he's at and is doing everything that he's doing. And I believe in Bobby so fully that he is doing what he believes is right and is good. That is truly my belief. But I just don't believe that Trump is almost shot or whatever happens, and they get together and this happens, and these two renegade guys are just about to change everything. I believe there's something to that, but I believe there's something much more powerful going on that's allowing that to rise and to happen. I don't know if it could happen if you didn't have factions that were coming together saying, you know what? I see how MAHA is going to benefit our bottom line and our version of the future. And that's where I see the military being critical to what looks like the success of MAHA. The last thing I want to say about why I'm so convinced MAHA is going to happen, and it's not good to say this because I hope my activists don't say, oh, I don't have to do anything, it's going to happen. It's not. No, it's not like that, because just because I think it right now, anything could happen. And there's competing factions with a lot of money. Sources are saying not millions, billions of dollars are coming after Bobby to stop his confirmation. And they're getting ready to stop him. That's big ag, that's big pharma, and they're coming in. Is it really just Trump and Bobby alone that greenlit that expenditure is okay at this point in time? That billions of dollars are now going to be spent to stop him from being HHS secretary? And there isn't a competing billions of dollars that has another reason why that battle needs to happen now. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with this right now.
Yeah, I think it's a very important observation that there seems to be a bit of a, if you can't beat them, join them situation, because Bobby did beat him.
Yeah.
Truly. Like, it's historic, not only his independent presidential campaign, the fact that his own personal family history, Kennedy going independent and now joining up with a Republican. But like basically every aspect of what he's done, getting things like vaccine safety into the general public's discourse in the context of a presidential election cycle. So like, he was a force to be reckoned with, and he he dominated, and that doesn't mean he was able to win. But the point is, I think what you're describing is a bit of a if you can't beat him, join him scenario, where you've got, and it's not just two factions, you've got, you can go very granular. You've got infinite factions, and so to the degree there's crossover in interests, it's easier for some to go, okay, we can take this, loss here because all it'll take is for us to move an investment over here, and then we can profit from this. And by the way, we always wanted this anyway. Don't know why all these other institutional folks are so opposed to this, so on and so forth. But then you have those who are, nope, this is a complete shattering of my worldview. This cannot stand. This man must be defeated, and everything he stands for must be sent to the dustbin. And it seems to me, and this is where it's interesting, we talk about competing agendas, but the question of, is it eugenics that we're talking about with Neuralink and all that? It seems to me the more accurate term would be transhumanism. Mm-hmm. Of which I think eugenics is a component, and it's right. I probably can't define it perfectly, but this notion of continual improvement of the human in every respect, and quite literally the cyborgification of human, and the transcendence, the singularity, the joining with the machine, the leaving the planet Earth. All these things to me fall under that category. And so it's fascinating then. I know, based on my study of what Kennedy has done and the work he's engaged in, that transhumanism as a concept is not something he's, jumping both feet into supporting.
Correct.
And yet Elon Musk, I think he himself probably would describe himself as transhumanist. Like, it's just what he does. That's what Neuralink is. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Gabe, I want to throw to you, and you've sent some very interesting links, and I just want to give you the opportunity whenever you want me to pull up any given tab.
Fair. I mean, some of those might be more relevant if we go further into the military campaign side of it. But on the cyborgs, the transhumanism, the eugenics side of all this, that's why, to be honest, already I've been trying to really hammer really hard this idea that medical ethics is something that is bigger than even just the MAHA fight. And so I think even if Michael's right, and boy, do I hope Michael is right. I hope he's right that Kennedy does get everything he wants done. But even if that happens, there is still a huge, important fight, which I would shortly summarize as medical ethics. Because as somebody who's kind of an outsider to, honestly, health and even the health movement during the COVID years, the big thing I noticed is that, to me, if COVID accomplished anything, I'm speaking here as a Canadian, I don't know too much of the details of how it went down in the States, but basically medical ethics was destroyed. You had this idea that you had this top-down imposition, and health was not about what is best for the individual person in their circumstances by their own choices. It's about what should we do to people to make them better. And that's very much something I see lurking in the dark corners of this coalition, is that cyborgs, augmentations, those can very much be considered medical countermeasures like the COVID shots were. And the problem is that that's where I kind of want to give, even somebody like Jonathan Cooey some credit here, where he points out this is the wrong way to augment the immune system. And I think a big reason why they need a big story right now is because when you realize some of the fundamental lies that people have been told about these things, because biology is not my area, to be honest. There's a reason I defer to other people on these discussions. But the thing is once you kind of peel the surface of oh shoot, what we're being told is a lie, it kind of opens the door to other lies we've been told. And I feel like a big part of what's keeping this coalition together is they don't want society to unravel because of that. Now, some of that's noble. Some of it you don't want to collapse. You don't want violence. You don't want craziness. But on the other side of that, there's a maintaining control aspect to this that I'm highly concerned about. And when it comes to digital augmentations or, de-augmentations, which I think is a more important part of this discussion, because when they talk about super soldiers in the literature, they're not really talking about enhanced humans. They're talking about humans they have more control over. And so it's very concerning about the technologies that currently exist. Don't even go into sci-fi spaces. A Fitbit and a shock collar is enough to really run a roughshod over somebody's individual autonomy, and never mind digital ID and some of the other crazy stuff that's coming. The fact of the matter is that I think we have to be very guarded about medical ethics and how these improvements to people's health, collectively or individually or however it's sold, are being used to bargain for things that are honestly quite ugly and devious.
Yeah, I think that's so critical right now. I think that when we start dealing with sensors, we start dealing with tracking, we're dealing with digital identification of all different sorts. You're going to see it creep into MAHA. You're going to see it. I would say it's already there, and you don't even have to scratch the surface too far to see it. Not from Kennedy at all, and I don't see that coming from him at all. But there are other factions and other people in other situations where that is there, and it is going to be sold as no, this is good. This is good for everybody. Okay, let's even say it's good maybe while you're controlling it. Maybe it's good while you're making the framework and the rules. Maybe. Are you always going to be controlling it? Are you always? And that also comes to the argument of why a Trump administration might make a number of these things easier to bring in, that the Democrats clearly basically are on board with wanting the most, dystopian stuff. But can they get the conservative MAGA voter to deal with it across America? Can they get them to say, okay, where Trump's going to come in heavy on heavy tech on the border to stop the immigration crisis with high tech? And all the conservatives are, yep, that's my guy, Trump. Well, how long till they turn it on the average citizen? How long till then that gets used if they have their training ground there? So I couldn't agree with you more, Gabe. That's, as I do think we're going to get a lot of gains from what I'm seeing right now, and I'm very optimistic. All of that other stuff is creeping just below the surface, and not that far below the surface. It's actually very, very close.
No, in fact, there are some very high-profile examples, not naming any names, but there's a certain vitamin retail company that I've previously been critical of that I noticed in a recent ad. By the way, not only have they totally succeeded in what I and my co-author, who I'll mention in a minute, warned about, which is capturing the entire, it seems, independent, at least Rumble-based commentator movement, but they've also adopted in recent ads quite literally the "Make America Healthy Again" slogan. All the power to them, I suppose. But that does lead me into this comment from none other than our friend Kristen Elizabeth, who says, don't forget how powerful the populist movement behind Bobby has been and still is. If you can't beat them, harness and guide the momentum. Yeah. I think that's a very good way to say what I was trying to say before, which is it's not just if you can't beat them, become part of the movement. No. If you can't beat them, see if you can guide that river. What do you guys think about that?
I would go as far as to say that is something you always have to be on guard on, no matter what the movement is, no matter what your cause is. Because, for instance, oddly enough, I listen to a lot of voluntarists who take anarchism and, small-scale governance very seriously, and I have some reservations about it, but I respect the values they're pushing for. The challenge, though, where I struggle with this a bit, is that I feel that there is a dark side to that as well. If you have tech billionaires saying, "Oh, we're going to have this voluntarist utopia where you tokenize yourself and you sell yourself on the blockchain for whatever nefarious apps," you can absolutely create scenarios where any movement can be co-opted for private gain one way or another. And so this is a truism no matter what. And I think Kristen, in that comment there, made a really important point, is that this movement is powerful. People know how much they've been under attack over the last decades or so, however long this has been going on. And there's a reaction to that. And that reaction has to be something we understand is a powerful force, because that doesn't always, not every powerful force is always used for good. But there's something real there that we have to engage with and participate in and be there around other people, because I hear some people who will tell me, "Oh, Gabriel, well, everything's fake, so don't even bother." And in my opinion, that is the worst attitude to have, because then you're just letting the money talk. If you're spending time out of your day to go out and talk to your neighbors, your friends, or, public forums like this, if you're spending your time to make your values and beliefs known, you are basically wasting a lot of money from these corporations and billionaires, or even governments who are trying to seed the narrative and decide what people should believe. And so the power of these movements has a lot more to do with, in my mind, I don't think they're afraid of a new administration. I don't think whoever got in the White House was actually going to be the thing they're afraid of. I think they're afraid of when people who are motivated about these things start getting the gears turning about, like, okay, so how can we tackle this, this, and this, and this? And it goes very well with what I said earlier about the lies, where people are actually digging deep into these problems on their own. Suddenly all the gatekeepers are swept aside. Academia is swept aside, the mainstream media is swept aside, and maybe even alternative influencers can be swept aside if the people themselves get together and do this on a grassroots level, but share information on this global communications network, the internet that we have. I believe powerful movements can have the best of both worlds, which is actually a big part of my calculus for how I see this situation, because I think wartime measures are coming. If you don't mind putting the Denny Rancor video here, because this is what got me on this idea. Denny Rancor is a great Canadian professor, activist here. He runs the Ontario Civil Liberties Association, and he was on Geopolitics and Empire, which is a show I listen to, but he was talking about how the COVID pandemic and the measures taken during it were a military kind of quasi-operation to invoke war measures, to control the population, to punish dissidents and free thinkers, which I think absolutely happened. You know, you watch that interview, not everything is panned out. He was saying not everything would be, relaxed until like a long time. But I think that depends on your perspective a bit, because while yes, mandates and lockdowns are no longer in effect, I wholeheartedly believe that there are still many things that are in effect. For instance, the erosions of medical ethics, the attacks on people, their serious health and economic and damage done to people during that time has not gone away. And another thing that's not gone away is that there is a huge percentage of the population, and I don't think it mattered what side of the COVID fight you were on, is that you were kind of militarized in a way. Because I used to believe that, as long as you're resisting the propaganda, you're safe. And I no longer believe that, because I spent like 2 or 3 years being scared out of my mind. And that has impacts, and that has impacts on a lot of people. So just because you don't see somebody ranting and raving, though I did my fair share of that, about, all the things they're upset about, that doesn't mean it's not affecting them. And so why I think this is so important is that they are going to need measures to keep people in line, especially if everybody is so fed up with everything that's going on and how governments are treating them. And so war, even if the war itself isn't necessary, it's a very great pretext to kind of force people to pay their dues or get in line or whatever the metaphor is, because I think population control is the name of the game here. And I don't see the factions, you mentioned the 2 different billion factions competing in this fight. Truthfully, I don't think they see that any differently. I think they're just more interested in what is the easiest way to control all the people and put all the issues that were opened during the COVID pandemic back into their nice little box, because they don't actually want people digging too deep.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I feel that many of the powers that be viewed COVID as the keys to the kingdom, that they thought they got it all, and they went in for it all kind of quickly. And in doing that, they exposed their hand. They made it clear, yeah, vaccines is about digital identity. It's about controlling your movement. It's about knowing everywhere that you are. It's about linking everything into a centralized, inoperable system that can communicate across various platforms and databases. And kind of outwardly, vaccine passports and all of this stuff that became kind of clear. But the people rose up in a way that was unprecedented for decades. And then the moment for me that became is always kind of the watershed moment was in Austria, December 2020 into January 2021. They attempt to make it illegal to walk the street unvaccinated. You could get fined multiple times in a day, and you could get imprisoned for not being unvaccinated. The freaking Austrians go nuts. They go nuts, and they're out in the street, and you have like top of a change of government heads. It's wild. And but then you get other things. You get like defeat the mandates in the US. You get the trucker convoy. That's probably your biggest one in Canada. You guys coming through up there north of the border. And then this Leviathan that feels like it's trying to control the population, control the mind, control everything, stops and backs away. And ever since that moment, it has continually done this. And now we're in this new moment of this new coalition, of this new vision of the future, not we're overpopulated, everyone needs their injections, we need less people, Gates. But this new, we're underpopulated. We need more people. We need vision. We need to go to Mars. Musk, but there's seeds of both in both. There is a way that it can be the route that we're on currently, this new route that Make America Healthy Again is somewhat of a foundation that other things are being built on or utilizing. There is a route to that same tyranny that the COVID situation wanted. It can come. I mean, Musk openly talks about one day everyone's going to have a Neuralink. It's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be not a big deal. That some people think that could be great. That could be a nightmare. I never want a Neuralink. But then again, I don't think he's talking to me. I think he knows, there's a whole bunch of Gen Xers that are never going to get it. Not really worried about you. It's your kids. It's your kids that I'm plotting for and that I'm planning for. So is there going to be this society that's locked down, get your injections, or you can't get a slice of pizza, you can't get a job, you can't go to school, and the population is dwindling? Or is there going to be a free population that you get injections if you want or if you don't want? But look, if you don't have Neuralink, how are you going to compete in the job market? I mean, think of all that time you spend like driving and that like you could be working, and look at how low your productivity is. Is that a different cage that we could end up going into? So we got to keep monitoring and see what comes of it, because I think ultimately I just agree with your point, Gabe. I think that there's a lot of trapdoors, no matter which way you go. And just one last thing I want to say is, Whitney Webb, Ryan Christian, and like kind of the anarchist wing of the freedom fighters that I love and that, I link up with and I agree with. They have this anti-voting, anti-establishment sentiment that I just haven't been able to get down with because they don't understand it. Because I am down for the plan that frees us all and frees us of the system and breaks the old system and builds a new. I just haven't seen it. No one has briefed me on it. No one has showed me what the way is. And as long as I'm paying taxes, as long as there's trillions of our dollars, of our energy going into these huge institutes and governments and HHS and Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and the hospital systems and all of this stuff, I demand a voice in it, even if it's imperfect. I demand to be a part of that. And that doesn't mean you can't convince me to leave that and to go into the let's get free now movement. I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen anybody communicate it to me in the way that I'm like, you're right. That's what we need to do now. I need to stop electoral politics. I need to get out of this system base and I need to form the new. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. Well, also,
I can't speak for that, but what I will say is that from what I understand, they're not telling you not to vote. They're telling people who believe the vote is the sum total of all their impact on the system, then yeah, why even bother? Let's be fair. You got to be involved. You got to be talking to people. You got to be holding your representatives accountable. Just because you vote for them because they promise X, Y, and Z, and then they don't deliver, you should pressure them. There's activities that should be going on. And personally, I'm a huge advocate of if you don't feel represented, you should find a way to support an independent candidate. Because yeah, starting a whole party on its own is a huge job. But hey, independent candidates, especially here in Canada with our parliamentary system, has huge advantages and they can make real moves in the halls of power in ways I'm not as familiar with what the advantageous route down in the States would be. I'm assuming having an independent congressman would still matter, or senator, or whatever the dealio is. And that's why the other side of this too is that local races matter. Most people will argue that all politics is local, and so if you don't care about the big presidential race, you can still vote on the lower levels of the totem pole. But to really try to steelman the idea of what you described there, what's the plan that frees us all? Actually, I tuned into their independent media panel on this, the Independent Media Alliance. They held a round table talking about this question of participating, and I believe it was Ryan Christian who basically admitted kind of what I was waiting to hear, where he said, look, if you're voting to prevent the lesser of two evils, that's always going to be a pain reduction step all the way down into infinity. And so what he was recommending is by not participating, representation is going to get worse. And he basically said you're going to have to go through multiple cycles of government getting worse and worse until everybody has had it, which I'm going to be honest, I'm a little skeptical of that, because I believe if they're correct that government itself is immoral because it's applying force and that people use force to domineer others, I kind of want to argue that that will always happen. There will always be a crew of people trying to dominate. And so what are the best strategies to mediate that power? And I think that's a really broad, open discussion that I would love to see, people on your side, people on his side, really hash that out, because I'm not too certain about that. I think that's a huge question. But I think a big part of this has to do, if you're someone like me who's concerned about nations sending their citizens to war for garbage reasons, let's be honest, there's very few, legitimate wars are a very small list even throughout all of human history, if you could even call them that. And so if you're against wars, period, you're very tempted to say, well, if we just get rid of governments, wars are going to go away, which I don't believe at all, because there are private militaries, there are private, mercenaries. There's a lot of violence and organized conflict that can still happen in the private sector. I mean, I used to work for private security. Yeah, I wasn't armed, but it's still a use of force situation where you're going to be interacting with people in the real world. And that's, I think, part of the dilemma here, where we are kind of sandwiched, in my mind, between these two visions. And I really like how the commenter Kristen Elizabeth told me once, where it's like these tech bros are kind of building a new future that's different from maybe the trajectory we're already on, but most people aren't invited. I don't believe that they actually want more human beings participating in the same system as them. I think they want more bodies to be used for whatever their bizarre machinations is, whether it's warfare, whether it's experimentation, whether it's, cybernetics, all of that stuff. To me, is more or less that they see humanity as a means to an end, whether it's the Bill Gateses of the world, whether it's the Elon Musks of the world. I believe when you are using those people as a means to an end, you're never going to care about their welfare. And that's why I think it's fundamental that we really push medical ethics as really the tip of the spear of this entire discussion.
One thing I just wanted to add into this is that I was talking about this with John Gilmore, a good friend of mine, and about how the MAHA might be a basis for militarization, helping the military. He sent me a document called Fit to Fight, Manpower Crisis of 1917 and 1918. And this was in England, where the populace, the masses, mostly the extremely poor masses, had so much malnutrition was going on through them. The population, England was having a problem manning their military. So they actually came in and made sure to nourish the people better because they needed soldiers to fight their battles. And that's literally what they did. So there is historical precedent for this as well, too. But just at the time, you weren't talking about also cyborging or even deep space. But still, it's not that far-fetched to think we need to get the people healthy so we can do what we want with them. So that's actually in part what a big thrust what I think is happening right now. Yeah.
And one of the big threads I've been following in this idea, because I really didn't intend on being public about this thought. I've been carrying in my head really at the whole time at all. It's just kind of serendipitous that I told Liam about it. You told Kristen about it. It happens. And so the thing is that to me, one of the things I was following was the recruitment crises all over the NATO countries. And what's interesting is it's not even just NATO. This is a worldwide phenomenon. China is even having the same problems, where they're having troubles with obese people. Apparently masturbation is a problem in China, so they can't recruit them if they masturbate too much. I don't know. But anyways, there is a set of military criteria for what these armies need, and people are not making it. And even the few who are, there's a challenge where there's an alienation that's gone on. There is this entire idea that, young people aren't invested in society anymore. And so we just got to get them, back into the saddle, so to speak. And to me, this feels outright predatory. I'm like, you've basically kicked people out of the property ladder, and now you're going to say, hey, come fight for us. To me, that's disgusting and horrible, even if there's nothing else wrong, which there clearly is. But the thing is that the alienation of the youth has not only been studied, but like many other things that have happened as part of this conversation, I don't think they're accidents. I read an amazing post this morning, I'm sorry I didn't queue it up, but I'll send it to you after, by Conspiracy Sarah talking about Ozempic. She was talking about how, the obesity crisis was predictable. As a heavy person, a lot of what she said in there kind of makes sense, and I'm tackling it on my own. But the thing is that she made the connection to how that hooks up with all the digitization and, using Fitbits and glucose monitors, all those kinds of things, where you can basically have technocratic health, where you have all these systems hooked up to people, and then you can try to work on towards it. And so there's this problem reaction solution model playing out in all these different areas, and the timing is way too suspicious. The fact that you have so many young people out of the workforce, the fact that you have Ozempic just in time when they really need to get those obesity levels down, and they have all these different reforms going on that are fast-tracked towards this potential military space, whatever we want to call it, campaign. And one of the more culture war angles to this is many people are saying and speculating that what we call wokeness is going to be dismantled as part of this campaign. That, oh, that's alienating too many people, so we're going to put that away. And I've kind of kept up with it. There is some things moving in that direction. Apparently Walmart is now abandoning their DEI programs, which, I mean, Walmart is not really the company I would think of as for corporate responsibility, period. But we are seeing this gradual, I would almost call it a complacency push, because for all the things Trump represents for people, I would say for the majority of Americans in the election who voted for him, I think he still won the popular vote, but anyways, for the people who voted for him, I believe Trump, if nothing else, represents let's just get things working again. And I think most people can agree on that. And for Harris, demonstrably she represented, out of touch elite, all the celebrity endorsements, having, was it Liz Cheney being, featured so prominently, which is, right, which is part of the whole, war caucus here. It really is both parties. I'm not giving either party an easy out on this. But the truth of the matter is that I think Trump, like kind of, Michael, how you mentioned, there's this gradual stepping away post the convoy. I worry somewhat that this whole weird political shift, maybe to the right, depending on how we want to call things nowadays, I wonder if it's part of that. If they push so hard to alienate so many people, and then once those people were so fed up with it, it became an overwhelming force. The solutions were already ready and waiting to be hopped on, in the ways. Like, I'm being too cynical and too suspicious here, but that is very much where I'm at when I come see these things, because there are trends. There is the youth disaffection. There are the economic consolidation, the censorship. I personally believe, in hindsight, the censorship had nothing to do with the issues that it was first brought on for, but it's because they are building the infrastructure to suppress any dissent of whatever these national security objectives are. I mean, we lived through that during the COVID years, but I don't think it's letting up anytime soon. Many people will talk a big game about what Trump can do to kind of like eliminate the censorship industrial complex, but I think as somebody who's so focused on the technology side of this, it's way bigger than just what one department of the government is doing. It's a broader social, political, and technological fight. We are not seeing many people embracing the free and open web. People are rushing to like some of the major platforms because that's where people are. And so I think this huge fight, whatever you want to call it, involves so many more aspects than just the surface level of just one angle people are focused on.
I want to circle back to the notion that, COVID, it's fascinating how often the language around it was language of war. We're in a war against the virus, that kind of thing. And as we've discussed thoroughly in this program and in many previous, COVID was an era of total, basically total control over civilians. And it's fascinating how how war itself, like actual physical hot conflict, as I understand it, two things. First, violence and conflict are part of human nature. It's part of the human experience. You're all, as you say, like war, even if we dismantle the, military industrial complex, war won't end, as in conflict between people and peoples won't end. However, if you, as I understand it, look at the last few, certainly over the last century and a half of major conflicts, the degree, and Matthew Crawford, Rounding the Earth, has really helped me understand this. The consolidation of power over civilians and over other governments that has occurred in, World War I. How many empires were, how many empires just disappeared at the end of World War I. Countries that were monarchies are, those fell. World War II is the beginning, really, of American military, authority over the rest of the world, and the dismantling of, nations like Germany and Japan. Looking at war as itself being a tool of control over civilians, and then also, depending on your worldview, a tool of population, not just control, but reduction. The meat grinder of armed conflict and the millions upon millions of people who have died in World War I, World War II, and, smaller conflicts like the one right now between Russia and Ukraine and what's going on in the Middle East. A difference of worldview being, the Bill Gates model where there's too many people and it needs to go down. Well, that is consistent with that model. That is, the end result of armed conflict in that case would be, a happy accident perhaps for that worldview. Whereas an Elon Musk would look at that and go, no, we need those people to be doing other things. But this is all circling back to this notion that, as we're looking at here, COVID-19 is a war measure for population control in shadow of U.S.-China conflict. Now, the U.S.-China conflict is interesting because it's not hot. It's a very kind of cold, almost economical war. But there's the constant threat that it could go hot. Invasion of Taiwan by one or the other.
Well, I'd like to jump in there, actually, because one of the things I was thinking about before we went on today is what are the counter arguments to MAHA being part of a military ambition, one way or another. And one of the arguments against a big NATO versus BRICS, US versus China conflict is that the US is dependent on China for manufacturing so many important things. And while there is an offshoring discussion going on right now, there was the trade war, and now even Trump's pushing for more terrorists right now. I do think there is that economic restructuring going on. But I imagine, again, geopolitics is a little outside my area, but from what I understand, you have this giant world chessboard, or I can make it more akin to a game of Risk, which is a tabletop game where people roll dice and invade various territories around the map of the world. And just because two large, powerful entities decide to duke it out, it's not like there is an instant acceleration to nuclear war. There's acts of aggression, there is retaliation, these things kind of move back and forth, and every party, to the degree it's rational, which I hope most of these big powerful players are at least somewhat rational, they're going to play it strategically. And so when I see these moves, I know we're not going to see an immediate escalation to World War III, because truthfully, nobody really wants that. I assume even in the most horrible machinations of the tyrants, they don't want the world to blow up any more than you or I do. But the difference is that what I see going on is when it comes to the limits to what prevents the war from happening, whether it's how compliant is the population, how are the economic scenarios, how is the recruitment numbers, how is the health of the citizenry. The fact that they're working on all these factors at the same time is very suspicious and very troubling to me, because it's not like we're just getting health and then they're going to work on the other stuff later. No, this is all more or less happening pretty much at the same time in a pretty worrying pattern. And the other thing that people are pointing out as to why a global conflict kind of can't happen, which to me is kind of a funny way of saying it, is that arguably it's already here. We have many conflicts and horrible atrocities happening all over the world right now. And the challenge is that we're kind of in this weird situation here in Canada and the United States where we're kind of responsible because we have this huge outsized power, but the ability to project that power is diminishing. And so are they just building back up that capacity to become the world police again? Who knows? I can only speculate. And so I think the question is that how ugly is it going to get as, say the Western power either declines or tries to hold on to relevance or even expands, because who knows what's going on in the space direction. As you mentioned, space is a really important strategic asset, even if it's just satellites and Starlink and data connection, which is interesting because that's something Musk has a hand in. He has a hand in the satellites and the internet side of things, which I'm concerned of from a decentralization standpoint, but that's really what's concerning me. And so actually, Liam, if you don't mind pulling up the Fit to Serve CDC document, because what I find interesting is that this is, again, really beyond both parties. Even before Trump got elected, this was something I saw where they're talking about all the barriers to military enlistment. And it's crazy to me because I've seen articles about this, but I didn't know public health was paying attention to this already. And so one of the things I'm noticing is that when it comes to governments in general, there is this problem where there's what they promise us, there's what we'd like them to do, but there's what are they ready to start doing right away? And I think there's probably been a lot of thought put into this particular Trump coalition on how they can hit the ground running on various initiatives. And so again, I'm anticipating that military readiness is going to be a higher priority than other things simply because of this, and the fact that there already is the momentum within the institution to try challenging this or improving it.
So this document here, can you tell us more about it? It's dated February 9, 2024. Is that when this first was published?
I would have to check, but I believe so. And the thing is what it's basically saying is that, like, not many eligible recruits, sorry, my everything's freezing now, are fit to serve. That's why they called it that. And that's really an important part of the discussion, because I think it's worth remembering what are the criteria they're worried about. And it says right there, overweight or obesity, educational deficits, criminal or drug abuse record. And that's the thing. They say it amounts for 90% of military applicants for people within a specific age range. That's not a huge part of the population. And so one of the things I'm really kind of concerned about here is I actually don't think most of the reforms that are done for the sake of military readiness will be impacting the entire population. It's what Michael said earlier. They're coming for your kids. It's your young, healthy adults or healthier adults that they need to get in the best shape to meet this criteria. And it's interesting in a way because the criminal and drug abuse side of it is something that's been really enhanced. Like, all of these problems were kind of created in a sense. Matthew Crawford believes education is sabotaged. We talked about the Conspiracy Sarah post about obesity, and the criminal and drug side, like, there's the whole fentanyl crisis. Like, that's a huge problem right then and there, opioids. And you have this setup that it feels like, again, I believe people were set up to fail. I believe what happened is that these problems were created either to profit off them or whatever, but then there was this understood transition. Okay, once this gets too bad, we're going to switch gears and do this. And it could be just opportunism. It could be as simple as now we're at the point where the rubber has hit the road, and they're like, we're not going to be able to hold on to power unless we run, a whole of society initiative, kind of like they did during the COVID-19 crisis. But I very much see global wars as part of it. And that's why many people have observed that it's like, oh, the pandemic was a military operation done to all of us. And I think that's probably closer to the truth now that we're looking in hindsight with all this weird machinations. And I think the response that happened was predicted. And that's kind of a spooky thing to really think about. It's like, it feels like even I'm a marionette on this big chessboard, like nobody is safe.
Well, which just brings us back to what Kristen was warning about, which is no matter who you are with the best of intentions, the way that social dynamics can be manipulated, it can be quite unseen and sophisticated. The key part of it is not getting paranoid and questioning your very reality to the point you can't live a happy, healthy life. So striking that balance, of course, is quite difficult. Michael, were you going to jump in with something?
One thing I would say is that even the most powerful players want you to believe they have this all worked out, because then you are powerless, because they call audibles constantly and they're good at it, and they're good at saying, okay, that didn't go how we wanted it to go, it went this way, what's that play now, what are we going to do? So I agree with Liam that we don't want to question ourselves out of our power, because I do believe we're powerful. I saw it during COVID. I saw what happened in New York, in America, across the nation, the networks of organizing that happened worldwide, these 24 to 48 hour periods where there would be protests of millions of people across the world simultaneously. There's never been anything like that in history. So I think we all get an attaboy for that. You pat yourself on the back for what you've done and what you have done well. I also, one of the last things I want to say, and Gabe, everything you've laid out I really appreciate it. I want to dive deeper in it.
Thank you.
Too, because it's eye opening for me as I've approached this from one angle and you from another. It's really good to see all of this. I do think there's dark ages and golden ages. I do think there's ages where the power players want to kill and suppress and cull, and then when they want to grow. And I don't know what's in the secret sauce. I don't know how precisely they determine that or steer that and such. My gut is telling me, even when Trump said we're on the cusp of a golden age. I mean, Trump loves to talk great about everything the guy does turns to gold and platinum. I get that, but something in that is resonating in me, that there is this era of growth we're about to see here? Is it an era of growth for military readiness for terrestrial conflict? Is it for something else? Does it matter, actually? Does it matter which one it is? And maybe they don't even know precisely what it's for, but they know in what the audibles and what the potentials are. Okay, now we have to grow. We've done this thing that we've done. We've done the experiments with these shots on people. For example, this guy, Dr. Dave Weldon, who's head of the CDC now, was nominated to be head of the CDC. I think he's going to get confirmed. He's a well-known, loved Republican, very well respected. A Republican Senate is going to be up to confirm him. This guy has questioned vaccines causing autism for decades. I have personal friends with adult autistic kids that are saying, what am I going to do with my kid when I die? Where do they go? So and this is a crisis of millions of adults that are growing up that need care, and what's going to happen to them? Where are they going to go? I feel like Weldon's going to come in, and they're going to release the data. That's what he's always said. They're going to discover I believe they're going to discover some horrible truths about medical interventions that have damaged children. And I think that's going to change. And I think they're going to at least offer more options, that like parents get more choice. I think there's going to be a reframing of big pharma, of what the industry is. And I think we're going to have some healthier youth. I think that's going to happen. And what do they want to use them for?
Well, I want to double down on what you said there, because like optimistically, okay, like you said, does it really even matter what the end goal of all this stuff is? I think there's a very powerful lesson we can learn from the COVID years, which is don't betray the young. You know, fundamentally, that's kind of how I see what happened when you had the mandates. You had children who were basically, their needs were considered last in all this, the school closures, the everything. We can go on and on about that. But the thing is that the same thing applies with a military draft. If we're going to give the short end of the stick and then just, we're releasing the gas pedal right in time to put you into the meat grinder, I think it is on all of us who care about liberty across the board to push against any kind of attempt to draft young people into a war that's definitely going to be unsound. And we're already seeing movements right now that we need to push really hard about it, because one of the biggest problems, especially during the COVID years here in Canada, you know, restaurants would fight to stay open, gyms would fight to stay open, various establishments would try to push back, but there was no community support. And so I believe the biggest way to fight back against any kind of draft or serious tyranny in that case is you need the community to get together. You need people to oppose this head on, be aware of it, which is really the only reason why I wanted to talk about this publicly, is because there are real stakes to all this. There are real stakes that in the event of a draft, you want to be in a community that's thought about this and is trying to create alternative ways. Because imagine for a scenario, they use the same methods they used on vaccine mandates. Oh, you can't get a job unless you're in the military or something silly like that. You know, you as a community can rally around those young people and protect them from that situation, which originally would only be for, you know, the really wealthy who like are in the know and all those kinds of things. And I think it's really important that the lesson I think we need to learn from the COVID crisis and now this is that like ethics is really important, but we're fighting for not just our own children, but everybody's children. Like it's a bigger fight than just, what's happening to my descendant. Because I agree with you, we're going to find out a lot of really ugly things about what has been done to people's health from the earliest ages, even getting higher now. And that's going to be an ugly discussion that most people aren't going to want to face. And I'm worried that they're going to dress up this whole adventure, whether it's Cyborg, whether it's Mars, and they're going to be put into some kind of bizarre meat grinder. And we can push back against this. There are opportunities to reverse that tide if we come in with the same force that is behind this movement. We have the ability to do this. I don't think it's impossible or outside our capacity. I just think we need to double down on that understanding and willingness to form ranks and protect people who are the specific targets of these agendas, because they never go after everyone all at once. It's, the workplace mandates came for this workplace and that workplace, and it was hard for everybody to coalesce under one place. So it could be as simple as, they start with the 18-year-olds, then the 18 and 19-year-olds. And it's like, I didn't care because I didn't have a 19-year-old, but then your 24-year-old, a year later, was go after. So it's very important to be really strong on these issues. And I think it's most important that we think about, in the event of a draft, who is it really for? Is it for our children? Is it for the society we're trying to build and take care of each other? Or is it for other more nefarious purposes? Because if it was wholly good, I don't think they need a draft, is all I'm saying.
Well, and this is where I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? So this article that you sent, this is from Fox News, published back in June. House passes defense bill automatically registering men 18 to 26 for draft. And I was just reading through. They have not invoked a draft.
Right.
It's my understanding the last time that happened was the Vietnam War. Am I right, Michael?
Yes. Yes, that was the draft ends shortly after that.
Yeah. And so that's not what's happened here. What they have done, it sounds like, is they've cut out a step or a bunch of steps. If they were to invoke the draft, it's now much, much easier. There'd be less opportunity for...
Right. But it also says the House passed the bill. Did it go through the process and get signed into law, or did
Yeah,
this
good
just
question.
pass the House?
I'm not sure. So that's perhaps something...
But I want to... But what is important is this passed out of a Republican House, right? So Republicans had control then. Republicans have more control now. If this is part of the agenda, this is likely to be signed by a Trump administration. This is likely to go through if you have, who's that? Mike Johnson, the head of the House, that is moving this forward.
Yeah, I think we can consider this outdated. This is long enough ago that I'm sure there's been plenty more that's happened. But the point remains, like there are still... So this, for example, was an effort. I believe it was overwhelmingly voted for. One dissenting vote, I think it was, in the House.
Wow.
Oh, no, that's not right. Sorry. So this is why I say we should move on from this, because I haven't read the whole thing. But the point being, there are efforts in place. Yeah, Gabe?
Yeah, I'd really been collecting data points, and that's actually one of them, is the fact that Palantir, the guys with all the war data, are now predicting another big three-front war. That's kind of really interesting to think about. And
so this is where I'm going, because I think, Gabe, I think it was you who said, when push comes to shove, like no one really wants the meat grinder. No one really wants to hurt people.
Right.
Well, I might throw some historical examples there that might suggest differently, and perhaps some today, but there are some. My point is, there definitely appear to be some people who think that is coming. I'm wondering if you can walk us through this particular prediction, and then I want to get your guys' thoughts on, none of us being geopolitical experts, but what do we see the current situation as being in terms of, are we about to jump into an actual hot conflict, and if so, where?
Well, to me, what's interesting about this piece is I'm really interested in who has access to the information, and I've been kind of following the technocracy, digitization, algorithm ghetto side of things, and Palantir has access to a ridiculous amount of battlefield data. They're going on in the Middle East. They run the systems down there. They run the systems, I believe they're involved in the Ukraine war in a couple of ways. And so the thing is that they built this amazing tool that I think went viral on X a while ago, where it's like War GPT. So it's like this chat interface, and it has a map, and it asks like, oh, where are the insurgents here? And it's like they're building really powerful technologies for war. And Palantir, I believe it's Theo, the CEO himself, says something along the lines of like, we're the national defense company for the United States. And so they kind of are the privatization of national security, which itself is a worrying trend, because when you have these private, unaccountable entities, to me, that's really worrying, because that was the whole argument for social media censorship. Oh, they're a hand away from government, so they can do horrible things we would never allow. And now it's like we have all these private companies fusing with the military sector, and that's terrifying to me on a couple of different levels, but especially on lack of accountability, because really, I don't know how accountable the military can be, but at least it's in theory under the government structure, and in theory you have a say on that. But private companies that are contracted, that's a whole other mess. And again, it's like these are the guys with the data, whether it's accurate, whether they have everything is a whole other discussion. But I think it's very telling that even somebody like Alex Karp is even saying this out loud. If this is something, why is this being put out there? Is it being a trial balloon? Are they trying to see who's on side? I mean, they're the people who would want to be analyzing who's for and against anyways.
Yeah, well, and perhaps, so Palantir, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention, of course, the Peter Thiel being head of Palantir, also, Whitney Webb has written extensively on this, and I wrote a follow-up piece about this based on her work. The notion that the soon-to-be vice president is sort of a protege of Peter Thiel, and that J.D. Vance, in his venture capitalist career, has been largely, I suppose, funded, sort of groomed by Peter Thiel, who we've just been talking about his company. And so I wonder, how do we reconcile the fact that the vice president may or may not, at least on first glance, there's the potential, the concern for conflicts of interest. And now I'm not sure at this moment what his current financial ties are to these enterprises. Presumably there are these checks and balances that are supposed to kind of cut those off. But as you say, Palantir remains a very big, like, what did you say they call themselves? Like the national defense contractor. And as part two to that question, circling back to Elon Musk and actually Vivek, because these are two gentlemen just appointed to lead this new Department of Government Efficiency, both of whom have substantial potential conflicts of interest across a variety of industries, including defense and also biopharmaceuticals. Vivek Ramaswamy's companies, and he has a few, themselves right now are in court battling to claim what they claim is their financial stake in the COVID-19 vaccines because of a patent issue related to the lipid nanoparticles. It's quite complicated. Point is, these are guys going in who are now, they're supposed to clean house. They're supposed to make changes to government, or at least recommend changes to government to make them more efficient. But, you know, a cynical person would look and say, well, they're just going to set themselves up to make a bunch of money. So how do we reconcile those things, gentlemen?
I'm just going to jump in and say, and this might have to be the last thing that I say on this, is that I never supported Bobby Kennedy for president, nor Donald Trump for president, hoping for perfection. And these types of conflicts of interest, these types of double dealings, these types of being a billionaire and manipulating government to your benefit. Welcome to the world. Welcome to America. I'm not surprised about that. And those things are going to be there. And hopefully there are checks and balances to help with that. I don't know if there will be or there won't be. For me, ultimately, if the Make America Healthy Again agenda is fulfilled in these next 4 years, even half of what I'm hoping for and what Bobby put out there, it is worth it. I am happy to be a part of it. Oh, I'll be there in 1 second. My son just came home. I fought for years for this. I followed this for 20 years, and I've seen people for 20 years fight for changing this. And so I'm here, buddy. I'll be right there. Give me a minute. Oh no, Jess is doing it. Yeah. Sorry. So, given that, that's what's the most important thing to me to occur now with what Bobby Kennedy and those who are supporting him are trying to do. I just came on, and I'm glad that we had this conversation and that we were able to do it to reckon. I hate to do anything eyes shut. I don't like endorsing people and then pretending they're perfect. I don't like to get into a movement and then get blinded from all this other stuff. No, I'm in my movement. I don't like that. I want to know the truth. I want to be eyes wide open in everything that I go into. I see MAHA as a net benefit no matter what, even if there's powers that view that as a platform upon which to build a militarized effort. But I think it's so important we talk about it. We don't hide it. We don't lie about it. We don't say, oh, no, that's not what. Don't say that. I'm not going to talk about that. It came up. I talked to you. I talked to Kristen. I talked to Gabe. And it became important to me that we fleshed this out. And I'm really glad that we did. I've learned a lot.
Me too.
Hour and 20 minutes of going through this and hearing Gabe and you, Liam. And I just want to encourage everybody who is seeing this, whatever you're into, whatever political party you're in, whatever lane you're in, whatever it is you believe in or you hope for, keep asking questions. Keep your mind open. I think that's the best tool, the best weapon we have against this gigantic system that might view us really as fodder, even if they want us to be healthy fodder. they still view us that way. And I think as long as we keep doing these, digging into stuff, and also having our spiritual centers, that's important for me too. I think we stand a fighting chance. Yeah.
Rock on, Michael. Thank you so much. And I'll let you go because I know you got to jump in with your family. Where can people find you?
I'll go to teachersforchoice.org, and that'll link you to the Substack, teachersforchoice.substack.com, on Twitter, on Instagram. Maybe I'm on Facebook. Not really. I can't get any reach there, but yeah, yeah, check me out there, follow me there, reach out. We continue to fight for medical freedom, Yeah.
Rock on, Michael. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If you got to pop out, no worries. I really appreciate the time you spent with us and for suggesting this. There's been a tremendous experience. I've learned a lot as well. And I look forward to seeing where this goes from here. But I share your optimism and your enthusiasm. So thank you for bringing that with us.
Yeah. And Gabe, thanks for coming on. I've learned a lot here, and hopefully we keep this conversation going and keep publishing stuff, and, see what's next. And we'll see what's next.
Rock on.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it. I can't top you, Michael.
Take care.
All right, Gabe, just before I let you go as well, I wanted to turn to you. Any final thoughts you want to share to wrap up the talk? And of course, where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work?
My website is libresolutions.network. I also have a Substack and other stuff linked on the homepage there. Liam, if you don't mind pulling up the War and Democide video me and Visceral Adventure put together, I feel like that's an excellent note to end this on, because I put together words from a fellow publisher out there named Spartacus, or at least that's what he goes by, and he published and recorded a series of podcasts about really just how ugly war can be, and especially in the American historical context. And so, because he publishes his stuff under Creative Commons, I took the liberty of taking the words, putting it to music, and Visceral Adventure and I put that together into a mini documentary. I didn't want to play it during this because it's about 18 minutes, if I remember correctly, but I do think it's a great place to lead you, that if you're really interested in this topic and how nefarious war really is and can be, I would highly recommend checking out War and Democide on Visceral Adventure Substack. It's very important. It'll be linked here, of course, and it's really something that it's a message I think we need to think about very deeply about what is war fundamentally used for.
Rock on. Okay, yeah, I posted that in the comments. So, ladies and gentlemen, do check that out. It is a wonderful piece of work, and Tonica is fantastic. It's about time we, I think, have a discussion with her and check in, because she's had some very exciting personal news, which I'll let her speak to when she wants to. She's always welcome on this show as it is, and as are you, Gabe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I'll wrap it here, and we'll stick around. We'll have a quick proper goodbye after my little outro.
Sounds great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. Me, Michael, Gabe, we all appreciate your support and you tuning in. There's been a bunch of folks coming in and out on YouTube, X, and Rumble, and this is going to be uploaded across the various platforms. I've been Liam Sturgess. If you want to support the show, you can do that by going to liamsturgess.substack.com. You can become a free or paid subscriber to my Substack series. There's also a bunch of other links where you can support by PayPal, buy me a coffee, or just check out my other stuff in the description of this video. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this very channel. You have been awesome, audience, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. And I'll figure out how to take my face out of here one day. Ta-ta!